Welcome to the latest episode of the Dribble Drive podcast. Your hosts, Austin Render, Dalton Shetler with you here on Tuesday, June 24th, episode 52 of the Dribble Drive. And we are in our final summer. I guess this is technically the first episode of the true summer season, but we're getting into preview episodes a week from today, July 1st, and running all the way up to the start of the season. We'll be attacking one team a week for the next 18 weeks. So preview season starts next week, but today is our final, we're calling it summer cleanup episode here. We're going to do some NCAA conversations about the house settlement and all that stuff. We've got some rule changes that are coming up we want to touch on for this coming season, which I think are pretty important. And we'll do some preview talk of what we expect or what we might see in 25-26. But a reminder, check out our YouTube channel, the Back Home Network YouTube. You can find all our podcasts under the podcast link on that YouTube channel. It's a full list of all 52 episodes. If you want to go back and watch any of them, they should all be there. That's obviously in visual form. If you're the type of person who likes to listen to a podcast on the drive, maybe you're on a walk, we're on Apple and Spotify podcasts as well. So check us out there. Give us a rating, a follow, a download. All that stuff really helps us. And tell a friend. If everybody tells a friend, we just continue to grow the pod little by little. And let them know, hey, we're going to start previewing your teams here coming up here on July 1st. There's not really a particular order as to when we're going to preview said teams. We're just going to shoot and see what happens. And we'll go one team at a time. We're going to hopefully bring in some guests throughout the preview season as well. Dalton, I guess I just did 2 minutes on my own. I should probably ask you how you are. And welcome to your own podcast, sir.
Hey, you know what? We were talking right before we even went live, and we said, you know what? It's a bit of a lazy river in the summer. You just take it where you're flowing. You just kind of ride the waves. But you can tell I've been getting a lot of sun, man. It is hot lately, but we're surviving. We're having fun with it.
Yeah, we've been under a heat advisory for like the last 5 days, and we're going to keep doing it this week. There's a local tournament going on at the golf course here, and those kids are walking, and I just that's a disaster. That's a mess. That brings me back to my playing time in high school, and how if it was over 90, you just knew you were done. You're going to get cooked. Mentally, it's a battle. Yeah, no, thank you. Not to worry though. We are inside, and thankfully the AC is working for both of us. Let's start. I want to issue an apology to the folks of Hawkeye fans. We put out a graphic last week of all the top returning players staying with their current teams coming into this year, and our graphics department put out a graphic that had Hannah Stuelke on Oregon. That's obviously not correct. She's still with Iowa. Hence why she was on that graphic. So we have fired and laid off all of our graphics department people. So we will not let that happen again.
It's a very rigorous disciplinarian system we're running here.
Look, it's a one strike and you're out type of thing. Like, we just can't have those issues. I've heard a certain somebody's learning Photoshop, aka me, and you know what? We may have just overlooked the typo. So,
do you think the Kelly Graves and Ducks fans were sitting there and they read a graphic and they're like, "Really? We did?"
There's some Oregon fans going, "We picked up Hannah Stuelke? That's a nice addition." Sorry, Oregon fans. You did not pick up Hannah Stuelke. She is still with Jan Jansen of the Iowa Hawkeyes. On a much different tone, let's talk about what's going on in the NCAA and just in general with the sports world right now in college athletics. If you're like me, you've probably seen all this stuff bubbling and seen all the words house settlement have been kind of buzzwords here over the last year or so. The revenue sharing has been the buzzword. And if you're like me, maybe you haven't taken a step back and said, I probably need to look into this. So I did a little bit last week. Dalton's been really into this here over the last few weeks, months. And so, Dalton, I kind of want to turn it over to you. The big thing, this was, I think, last week, maybe this came about. It's come about since we last talked, but schools are now permitted to pay their athletes directly. Mm-hmm. So kind of Explain what that means. It's not a total free-for-all, obviously. They're not just going to throw money at people, but there is some rhyme or reason to this. Explain what this new revenue sharing, this paying athletes is going to entail.
Yeah, there's a couple of important facets of it. One is the current and future, and the other is retroactive. There will be retroactive back pay for athletes from 2016 to now who didn't have an opportunity to take part in the revenue sharing model. That also currently is in a bit of a pause or a bit of a delay because there are multiple Title IX lawsuits being filed against that decision to say, hey, we need to break this up evenly because the men's sports with football, men's basketball are getting a very high number, I think in the billions. Don't quote me on that, but I think. And the women's number was much, much lower to hundreds of millions. So that's currently in a bit of a pause or a delay. But to what it means for now in the future, it means that institutions can pay $20.5 million of their revenue to its student athletes. They do not have to. They just can't. That number also will rise over the course of years. It's kind of fixed on a steady gradual rise throughout years. But how this looks for $20.5 million for the student athletes, a lot of the athletic departments are following a model. That doesn't mean everybody doesn't mean everybody has to, but 75% of that revenue payments goes to football, 15% to men's basketball, 5% women's basketball, 5% everything else. That seems to be the model that most are going to kind of follow. So this is where a lot of it will get kind of interesting too, because now you have players obviously getting revenue from that space. It will wipe out a lot of the university adjacent collectives that are currently in place and that we've seen during the NIL era in the early stages that really resulted in pay for play, Austin. Now, that doesn't mean somebody can't be disconnected from the university or athletic department and look to sponsor an athlete on the side for their name, image, and likeness. But the name, image, and likeness process is also supposed to get a lot more authentic, maybe the best way to describe it, because there will be a process with the NIL. Any payment or contract of $600 or more will actually be sent through to Deloitte, as they're going to be kind of the arbiters of market value to make sure that, hey, are you paying this athlete $1 million and what are you getting in return? They're just doing an appearance fee one night. No, that's not the actual market value. That is clearly a pay for play type deal. We are not allowing that. Yeah. So there is going to be a bit of a process with the NIL on the side. Now, something else that's interesting, and I don't know if I'm already just talking too much and there's a lot of ground to cover. So I'm trying not trying to do it as carefully as possible in this navigation. In speaking with a lawyer the last few weeks, one thing that's really interesting is she has heard that a lot of these athletic departments and universities are looking to, they're going to have athletes sign contracts. And in those contracts, they're also looking to potentially take the NIL rights as part of that deal. So make it more exclusive where these student athletes aren't on the side doing all these different NIL things. Doesn't mean maybe everybody will. It's just what she had heard from some of the athletic departments she had talked to. But what does that look like will be interesting. And at least up here in the Mitten State, there's been a bill proposed by Joe Tate to try and limit such activity like that from happening. So that way athletes can ensure they still have their name, image, and likeness freedom. So there's a lot still being figured out with it, but that's kind of the gist, if that makes any sense.
It does. And yeah, I mean, we could do a whole hour episode. It's an onion. You just peel a layer back and there's more there. I saw a figure of 2.8 billion to be paid to players from 2016 to now. I'm assuming that's the men's number that you were talking about. Do you know why they chose 2016? Is there a rationale behind that?
The people who were involved with the I don't know if lawsuit's the right term or whatever, but with the case, they were participants from 2016. So because nobody was a participant from beyond 2016, they didn't include beyond,
Interesting.
if that makes sense.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, you kind of hit most of the notes that I had on here. One of the big things, like you said, any endorsement deal between a booster and an athlete will have to be vetted to ensure it is for a quote valid business purpose rather than recruiting incentive. Part of the thing with basketball, it's gonna be very interesting, Dalton, is the Big East.
Mm-hmm.
And schools like I'm trying to think, for example, like a Georgetown or a St. John's or some of these other schools that don't have football programs, Villanova. What is their revenue sharing percentages going to look like? Because you just said it, it's mostly to football and men's basketball,
Mm-hmm.
and then some to women's basketball, and then some to others. What do you do when you don't have a football team? And I know there's a lot of angry people, mainly in the SEC, who are like, hey, hold on a minute. They're going to get to put a lot more of their money toward basketball, and that's not fair. I don't think we can play on a fair playing. We haven't played on a fair playing field ever in college athletics. It's never happened. So sorry, Alabama. You've been playing on an unfair playing field for years. I don't feel bad for you. I have a lot of hidden disdain for Alabama after everything that happened with football season this past year. But it is interesting though. And you think about a team even like a UConn who has a football program, but their women's basketball program and their men's basketball program are their like bread and butter.
Mm-hmm.
So does Gino Auriemma get more than other schools that may be in a situation where, yeah, we want to put all our money toward football, men's basketball? I think about somebody like an Ohio State, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we know they're a great women's basketball program, but we also have to accept that football is king in Columbus. So what does Kevin McGuff and the women's team get in this whole thing?
And I think you nailed it too. It's really interesting because even prevalent Big Ten basketball programs in schools that maybe struggle in football, if you're in the Big Ten or SEC, you still have to give resources to that football program. You need football to have some sort of success. The way that uplifts the entire athletic department, it's hard to kind of describe. But if
Purdue would be a good example right now, like a team that is on the top of the conference in basketball. We know that, and they're projected to be a top 5 team again next year.
Yep.
But their football team has struggled. It was really bad the last couple of years, but you still got to fund that program because that's where the money comes from. Indiana, for example, had no like track record of being a great football team. All of a sudden, boom, they have this flash in the pan year, and now all the money is going to Kurt Cignetti in football because it makes the money for the university. So It's kind of interesting that they give every university a cap, and they say, use it how you want. If you want, like, I guess most teams are going to use it the same way, but in theory, if you really wanted to, you could put a majority of it toward basketball.
Correct.
If you really wanted to. Most teams with a football program are not going to do that. But it is interesting, like a Purdue. Like, man, our basketball team's really good, and we want to make sure it stays that way. But, yeah, it is interesting to see how all that unfolds. Like a North Carolina, a Duke, something like that. Teams that are known for their basketball programs, not necessarily their football programs. What do their percentages look like?
Well, and so what's interesting, too, as we talk about this, I just pulled up because the Big East, for the most part, doesn't have football programs that are within it. Their TV contract is so much smaller than, say, the Big Ten or SEC. So they have less revenue from that pot, which that is the biggest pot that a lot of these schools are working with. So that's something to keep in mind. And I just was trying to Google it on the side real quick. In June a year ago, ESPN had put that the Big East had a 12-year deal at one point with Fox and CBS that expired just actually this past year. It was averaging around $41.67 million per year. And if you remember the Big Ten's contract, where you're talking about 10 years and $1 billion, And how it goes out to the different schools. It's a different pot of money. Most of it will go to football, but I do think the pool the Big East is playing with is as large as the Big Ten and the SEC when it comes to some of those revenues because of like a TV contract like that. Just because it doesn't offer the same type of services like a football product on the weekend.
That's a great caveat because you can get caught up in a team not having football, but that also means they're not making as much revenue as these other schools. A couple of questions that kind of still linger is the whole employee situation. Like, will college athletes ever become employees? I was reading an ESPN article about it. College leaders believe that there are a lot of schools that would not be able to fund sports if student athletes became employees, because then you're talking about benefits, you're talking about a lot more money that's got to go into this. I mean, let's be honest, schools are already having to make a lot of adjustments within their athletic departments right now to make this work. And a lot of that is, well, now we owe X amount of money to these players from 2016 through now. And there's a lot of money that's having to go out of the universities right now in the athletic department. So I think that might be a step that's not quite ready to be made financially. Contracts, like you said, there are some contracts that are going to be signed in this. Are we ever going to get to a point where somebody has to sign a contract that states I will be at said school for X amount of time?
Well, and that's really interesting you bring that up because you have that current situation with Wisconsin. The defensive back there who decided to transfer to Miami, even though they had him on a contract. And Wisconsin has decided to sue.
And the Big Ten is supporting them.
That's going to be one of the precedent-setting cases in contract stuff. You nailed it. They're still not employees as of now. There's a big fear of when you start talking about the legal jargon of making student athletes employees, what is workers' comp? What are some of these different things?
Unionizing, all that.
And how much money that would cost. You're right. A lot of institutions are scared of it. And to be honest, Austin, a lot of institutions are scared now before even that. I mean, you have especially mid-majors or regional universities. Both of us are from Fort Wayne, God's country, as we call it. And my brother-in-law actually played baseball at Pre-Fort Wayne. They just shut down their baseball and softball programs. A lot of these regional universities are going to be pinched in some different ways and have to make these decisions. And then the biggest fear I currently have, Austin, about the college sports landscape, there's conversation about private equities. And I have the fear just because I don't know what it looks like yet. If private equities get involved, there had been the report immediately that Elevate had signed Penn State and UCLA. They quickly came out and denied that they were joining Elevate. But you wonder at what point do some of these universities go to the private equities for help with this cash because they're being asked to fund another $20 million that they weren't already. And I mean, some of this you can't just lay off and make the money up. So if private equities get involved, who's to say, and this is the concern I have, they don't look at an athletic department and say, hey, yeah, football is doing pretty good. The basketballs are all right. That swimming team, we're not seeing it die. That tennis team, why are we spending the money there? Why are we spending it on golf? Why are we spending it on this and that and this and that? And see if they don't just cut.
You might see that before the private equities even get involved, which is where the scary part of where we're at right now.
And it just completely zags to the zig of what college athletics and the spirit of this whole thing, the opportunities was to begin with. And obviously, look, we're not naive. It didn't just all of a sudden become a capitalist venture in college athletics. But nonetheless, like there was a part of this that was a little different. And you feel like if that starts to happen and they start laying off those programs, it'll really drive a stake through the heart of what college sports was about.
I'll go back and listen to episode 51 with Mike Hall. He mentioned that they kind of realized while he was at ESPN there in the mid-2000s, they kind of realized, hey, we can make money off of college sports. Like they weren't really doing a ton. They'd have some games on, but college sports have really boomed here over the last 15, 18 years. And that's worked. Also, one thing I should note, we apologize if you were listening to the Mike Hall episode and you're like, why did it just cut off at a really random time? We found out that there was a Google outage that I would imagine a lot of people were affected by this. There were a lot of Google outages that happened that week, and it just shut down our recording service. So we lost the last 3 minutes of that. Fortunately, it was only 3 of the 60 minutes and not more. But Mike was incredible. Go back and listen to that. One final looming question. We don't know the answer to this, but the question of how long are athletes going to be allowed to play is another one, because there's a lot of movement toward 5 years now. And I just feel like if you start opening up that can of worms, Dalton, we're going to have more people here for 7, 8, 9 years. And I love college sports. We both do. We work in it. It's great. I just don't think it's meant for 26-year-olds.
No,
like that's again, like the private equity thing, that's against the spirit of what this is about. Like, this is about young men and women getting to play sports they love. And there should be a time limit on it. Like, at some point, you got to move on with your life. Like, well, I hate that, but it's true.
Yeah. And what I find really interesting from this vantage point, too, look, the NCAA is paying for a lot of previous sins right now and the previous regime, and they're trying to traverse forward. But we're in a really shaky time in the landscape of it, because you have Greg Sankey in the SEC threatening at times to leave the NCAA and start its own thing. Like, you got a lot of the power brokers kind of fighting with the NCAA. The NCAA, anytime it feels like it wants to make a ruling, it has to turn to the Supreme Court or just federal government and say, please help us. We don't actually have the power to do this. So it feels like right now, the authority and power of the NCAA not only is being questioned, but it's being tested.
Yes.
And what all do you want to do with it? Do you want to expand eligibility years for players? Do you want to, I mean, this sounds ridiculous and I don't think it's a thing, but like, if we're testing things, why the educational ties to it? Just make it amateur, like semi-pro sports. I don't think that'll actually happen, but the point just is, it's really being tested on what kind of power it can govern with right now from all different angles. And it's messy, and I'm kind of curious to see how that plays out. And the last note, too, I'll make, Austin. I mean, you brought up like Ohio State football, Texas football. We all saw the numbers that were circling around this last year on how much those rosters had cost for those NIL groups to put together. The numbers that have been floated for some programs were above what the cap is moving forward for revenue sharing. And so that begs the question, if there was already a pot of money available for these players, and now it's being siphoned at a certain point, it makes you concerned, again, not being naive. We know there have been cheating in the past in college athletics, but it makes you concerned.
Yes.
And I'm not targeting a specific institution, but that brown bags might make its way back into college athletics and go under the table. I mean, that is a concern, at least of mine.
It is there. And I don't know how you fix it, but that's definitely a concern that you're not the only one who has voiced that, from what I have read and seen and heard here over the last few weeks. And that was a good conversation about that. We could talk about that for a whole episode. But I would imagine there's probably some people that are like, hey, talk about basketball. So that's what we're going to do at minute 23 here. We're going to talk about rule changes that are coming up in basketball, Dalton. The big one is the challenges. If you've watched any of the NBA playoffs, which don't ask me about it, it's still too soon. Coaches have one challenge. And if they are successful with that challenge, then they get a second one, and that's it. But it costs you a timeout if you use it and get it wrong. And you can challenge certain things, out of bounds calls, goaltendings, foul, like a build-up foul. Like, I forget what the rule is. There's a name for that. Where like a ball goes out of bounds and maybe you were the last to touch it, but you were fouled, and that's what created the ball going out of bounds. So they can go back and they can say there was actually a foul and so that caused the ball to go out of bounds. That's at least reviewable in the NBA. I don't know all the nuances of basketball. There is one really interesting caveat between men's and women's basketball, which I find this very interesting, Dalton, that they made new rules for this. So in men's basketball, you have to have a timeout to challenge. That's the same thing in the NBA. But in women's basketball, there is a rule that says you can challenge without a timeout. But you better be darn confident in that challenge, because if you don't get it right, it costs you a flagrant foul, as if you were to call a timeout without having one. I kind of love it. If I were the czar of college basketball, I would say let's make every challenge have a technical foul assigned to it. And then we would get people to stop doing this after every single play, and maybe take a step back and say, no, it was off of me. We're good. Let's move on. But I love it. It's going to add, I'm hoping it's going to speed it up.
Mm-hmm.
Referees will still be able to go to the monitor for time issues, flagrant fouls, goaltending, restricted area questions in the final 2 minutes. But they will not go on every single out-of-bounds play like we have seen here for the last few years, which just really, really kills the final couple seconds. I was talking with somebody about this. Game 1 of the NBA Finals, when Halliburton hit the 3, right, I guess the deep 2, to go up by 1, 0.3 seconds left. How long would the replay have been in college basketball to have looked at that to say, actually, there should be 0.4 seconds on the clock? Like, we would have sat there forever. So they can still do clock, and they probably still will. But the out-of-bounds stuff is going to be key. I think it'll help speed up play.
No, I think you're right. And it's funny, until you voiced the opinion, I was kind of on the fence about the difference of the coach challenge between men's and women's basketball and the way they're doing this. I'm kind of with you. I think this is a nice way to do it.
It's a real consequence on it.
Yeah, like it's a real gamble. And also, I like the idea of, you know what? You're down by 4 points towards the end of the game, crucial decision. All chips in. Yeah. Go ahead. Call the challenge. You know what I mean? Like there's going to be some real bold moves in this, and I kind of like that. I'm with you.
I like the consequences to your actions. Like, we can't just be challenging everything out here. You got to lose something for it, and sometimes now a timeout is still valuable. You only get 4 of them. It's more valuable in college than it is in the NBA for sure, especially in women's basketball because it advances the basketball. So you want those timeouts late in the game. But it's interesting. A couple other rule changes here. Players are allowed to complete a jump stop when feet land approximately at the same time. I think the main goal of this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dalton, is to take away all those traveling calls we see at the top of the key when somebody gets the ball, they shot fake, their feet land at approximately the same time, but because they didn't land at the same time, they went 1-2, and then they pivoted, and boom, travel. They're trying to create more of a freedom of motion, less travels. I'm in on that because I think those are such silly turnovers. When you get the ball, you shot fake, you don't realize you shuffled your feet a little bit. So I'm hopeful that will help, especially in women's basketball with the traveling calls.
I got to tell you, as a former player, when I read that, I was like, if only that could have been a thing for me, because I can't count how many times that would frustrate me when that would happen. But I think you're right. And we see, look, nobody wants to watch that many turnovers in the game, especially if they're not, you know what I mean? They're within the range of the play. They're within the freedom of motion. I think it's a good decision because we don't need to blow the whistle that many times for something that's that minute. And we also don't need to put that kind of pressure on the officials to have to make those calls the way we have. So I think that's a good way to allow the game to have more flow overall.
We need more flow. More flow in the game is better. They're also going to allow a little bit more hand checking from the defense. You can have your arm, your hand on the ball handler as long as it is not explicitly like restricting their ability to move.
You know, there was one time when I was playing in high school, an official explained it to me. When you're making contact like that, as long as you're not creating an advantage for yourself and a disadvantage for them with your physicality, then it's fine. That's how we play. I think that's kind of the basis of that. If your hand on them is moving them off their spot or whatever, it's creating an advantage for you, a disadvantage for them, then it's a foul. But otherwise, we play on.
I would love to see a basketball world where there's less whistles, there's more freedom, there's no more flow, there's more energy to a game, because what kills energy in a building is just repeated foul calls over and over again, or travels and all that stuff. Last one, just a funny note that I love how they slipped this in there. Jerseys don't have to be tucked in anymore, Dalton.
I saw
That's what we were all hoping would make it into this legislation. We were all so tired of jersey tuck-ins. I personally don't love when jerseys are untucked. I think it looks a little silly. I think people will still tuck them in, but we won't have to be like, hey, tuck your shirt in. Tuck your shirt in. Like, we don't have to do that.
My favorite. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say the players can do whatever they want with their shirts there. If they want them tucked in or tucked out, whatever.
Yeah, sorry to jump on you, but my favorite part is wondering what the origin of that was. Did referees like come up and they're like, "Look, I am so tired of telling these people to tuck in their jerseys. Let it go."
Oh, it's incredible. Oh, I love that was slipped in there. So those are some of the rule changes. We're excited. There's some flagrant foul changes that I think are more so for the men's game, with the groin area, not an immediate ejection, as we saw several times last year. That doesn't affect the women's game as much. I don't think there's a whole lot going on in the transfer portal in terms of additions, subtractions that has happened between the last time we've kind of talked about it. Is there anything you've noticed since we've last hit on the transfer portal that we should call out?
No, I nothing with the transfer portal. I was going to say, if you're looking for any kind of news, I know with the AmeriCup, there were some Big Ten members that
absolutely
got involved
on
the national team. Yeah. Grace Van Sluten from Michigan State, Kennedy Smith from USC, and I think there was another one, right? Or am
I think you're right. I just need to go find it.
I was going to say, I'll work on it too.
I know your Twitter page has it because you retweeted it. Yeah, here we go. Gianna Neepkins, who is now on UCLA.
That's right.
Is on the AmeriCup team. Hannah Stolke, the Duck/Hawkeye, is on the team. So there's a couple there. Yeah, I think that appears to be it from the Big Ten. Kennedy Smith and as you said, Grace Van Sluten. And then
that gets going soon.
What's that? That gets going soon. Yeah, absolutely. And then I believe the USA women's basketball U19, which is coached by Terry Morin, they selected their team as well. I believe that Sienna Betts is going to be on that team.
For Bruin.
What's that?
A Bruin coming.
Yes, an incoming Bruin to join her sister. And then Zania Soka and Guman from Indiana, who is a former Bruin, now a Hoosier, is going to be on that team as well. So we may have missed some people on that, but that's some newsworthy stuff there as well. That begins in July. So cool to see some Big Ten people being a part of that kind of stuff. Okay, so we were going to play a little question game here. I've compiled 9 questions here. Just kind of giving us an opportunity to see what we're thinking about for 2025-26. Where are our brains at? And I may ask you, Dalton, at some point here too, and there's a question that'll lead us into this, but I'm going to put you on the spot and I'll put myself on the spot too, and name our top 5 teams for this upcoming season. Ooh. We have not had to fill out any ballots. That'll be September probably when we have to fill out our preseason ballots.
Yeah.
And we'll obviously do a deep dive into our full 18 teams then, but we might get to that here at some point. But let's do some questions here. Let's start with this one. The reigning Final Four participants. What if UCLA is better this year than last year? They return pretty much all of their starters from this past season outside of London Jones, who became a starter later in the year and transferred to USC. So here's kind of what we're looking at with this UCLA team and some of the people that are going to be on it. You're looking at Lauren Betts, obviously, coming back, Kiki Rice, Gabriela Jaquez, and then Tamia Gardner and Angela Dukalich. Gianna Neepkins comes in from Utah. I saw her firsthand in the NCAA tournament. She's a 3-level scorer. She's really good with the basketball, has a really good shot. That's a potent offensive weapon to pair alongside one of the best facilitators in the Big Ten in Kiki Rice. So Neepkins doesn't have to have the basketball all the time. Rice can run the show and get her open, and it's going to clear up more space for Betts inside because you have to respect the three-point shooting of Neepkins. They're adding Sienna Betts, who's another big who joins with her sister, Lauren Betts. This team is loaded again. The one thing you could say if you're going to answer that question and say your concerns about them being better, I would think, is that they did lose a lot of their bench.
Yep.
A lot of their bench is gone. You think about players like Janiah Barker. She transferred out. London Jones transferred out. Some of the people that didn't play as much transferred out as well, like Zania Soganguman, who's now with Indiana. Dudley transferred out as well. I think she was with Oregon, if I'm not mistaken. That may not be right, but I do know that she transferred out. We're gonna make sure we get that right here. Michigan. Kendall Dudley is with Michigan. So, but what do you think, Dalton? Can this as you look on the spot, June 24th, is this UCLA team on paper better than last year's UCLA team?
You know, it's a really good question, too, because I feel like the UCLA outlook has went in waves throughout this offseason where at first there was the transfer portal exodus and everybody said, oh, what's happening over there at UCLA? Yeah. Why is everybody leaving? Janiah Barker's gone. All these players are taking off. London Jones goes across town to USC. What's happening? And then Corey Close adds that lethal addition of Neepkins. And all of a sudden you're kind of looking at it and just like you said, you have Rice running the show, Neepkins filling up buckets, and one of the best post players, if not the best post player in the country, in Lauren Betts. And I think when you talk about those other pieces, I think Barker was good for them. I think London Jones was huge for them this last year. Neepkins really obviously lifts that up a little bit. But getting back Jaquez, getting back Dugalich, who was kind of a later decision. I think they added enough of those returning pieces where I think this year's team is better than last year's team, and that's scary. I haven't looked up where 2026 Final Four is, but you kind of feel like UCLA has that on the horizon.
Well, when you look at this, these are your this is your rotation right here. This is your 7 people. You've got Kiki, Jaquez, Gardner, Dugalich, Betts, Neepkins, and the other Betts. That's 7 people right there that are pretty darn good. And you might add a couple in there here and there, but that's a pretty good 7 right there.
And you got a couple of Betts. It's a nice parlay in UCLA.
Look, if you get 2 Betts is better than 1, okay? Like, I mean, 1 was pretty darn good, but 2 is just fine.
Somebody tell Dave we got radio references for him to use next year.
2 Betts is better than 1. Well, here's a bounce off of that. My second question for you. What if Lauren Betts isn't the player of the year in the Big Ten? If it's not Lauren Betts, who are some of the people that it could be? Because I think look, for probably the last 3 years of Caitlin Clark's career, it was her award.
Right.
Last year, it was Juju's award. It was going to take a Herculean effort to take it from Juju last year. And Lauren Betts had a great season, but did not win it. She is expected to win it this year. My assumption. That would be my looking at the conference is that Lauren Betts is your preseason player of the year.
Yep.
If it's not her, who is it?
Well, given what we talk about here, and you mentioned that we're going to be filling out ballots and stuff in September, October, it would almost be surprising as of today if Lauren Betts isn't unanimous preseason player of the year. But if she doesn't end up being player of the year in the Big Ten, I have a couple of thoughts. One goes to Jelani Cambridge at Ohio State, especially with the exodus of Cody McMahon, who transferred away. It's Cambridge's show, and she showed so much quick twitch ability, athleticism in that first year. If she improves some and Ohio State has a lot of success, she could be in that conversation. But I also look, especially, I feel like in Big Ten women's basketball, we've talked about this before, Austin. a lot of the awards, more so than on the men's side, I think, is based on who the winners are, who's the most successful team. And I think Maryland's going to have a big year. And so it makes me wonder if Kayleen Smeichel doesn't get above 20 points a game and Kayleen Smeichel ends up in that conversation. But those are the first two that come to my mind. Who's on your head?
Ella Dean pops in my head. If Washington has a great year, it feels like she's the straw that stirs the drink there. The Michigan freshmen are interesting because I don't know if they would win it because I think they're both going to be good. And that's Olsen and Swords. Holloway is going to be great as well. I don't think she's in that same conversation. But Swords and Olsen are capable of being players of the year in a conference. I think if they're playing together, though, the production may not be there for one of them to be that. But I expect Michigan to be very good. So I expect them to be in the conversation. If it's a transfer in, is it somebody like a Gianna Neepkins at UCLA? Like maybe she trumps her own teammate. That seems very hard to do.
It does.
With how good Lauren Betts is expected to be. Maybe it's a Cara Dunn from Georgia Tech transferring into USC. Because I don't think the Trojans are not – like they're going to be a part of the picture.
Yeah.
Even without Juju Watkins. So do you look at a Cara Dunn as somebody who might be a part of this thing? I think we can easily look at, well, these are all the people that are coming back in the conference, and these are the people that are still with their teams. But are there people that transferred into the conference that are going to have a big year? I don't know if Penn State will be good enough, but what if Kilmy McMiller puts it all together? And that's going to lead me into another one of our questions is, what if Kilmy McMiller puts it all together at Penn State? How good can she be? How good can Penn State be if you get the 5-star talent of Kilmy McMiller for 30 to 35 games next season? Paired along with Gracie Merkel coming back, paired with others that are coming in. This is what Penn State. I didn't end up dragging in Penn State's, but you just wonder, like, is there enough firepower there? That's the question for Penn State right now. Is there enough firepower? Because you've got Mariah Murray, you've got Gracie Merkel, you've got Kilmy McMiller. What else? Is there enough there for them to be a tournament team? Because 2 years ago, they were right there. They were on the doorstep. They brought in Ashley Owusu to pair up with the players they already had. So this year they bring in Kilmy McMiller to pair up with their roster. I don't know if it's too lofty to put that all on Kilmy McMiller, but if she puts it all together, what does this team look like? And
it's a fair question because, I mean, look, we saw Kilmy at Kilmy's best at times at Rutgers, and when she's got it going, I mean, that's a tough out for any opponent to beat. You pair it with Mariah Murray, who can shoot the lights out. You have Merkel inside. You've got some pieces. And you're right with the context a couple of years ago. I was stunned that Penn State team with Owusu and them did not make the NCAA tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Leilani Kapanis was on that squad, if you remember.
Hey, Chesky was on that team.
Chesky, that's right. And she was kind of the on the bench at that point. And then she exploded for 40 points during the Christmas break. And you're like, what's going on with Penn State? Yeah. But nonetheless, I think Penn State could be really, really good if Kilmy could put it together. And really, really good looks like flirting with the NCAA tournament, I believe.
I think a pesky, tough team, when you go to Happy Valley, nothing's handed to you.
Right.
Because McMiller could go for 30 on any given night.
Now, there is concern, though, Austin, of like, we saw how this bottomed out with Rutgers and Kilmy McMiller. And I think it would be fair to have skepticisms about how it all comes together. But in a perfect world, if it all did, and that's the game of what if, all of a sudden, like she's one of those kinds of talents who would loft them in to tournament conversations.
For sure. And I think we're naive if we sit here and say it's all green grass on the other side for McMiller. I mean, we have to consider what did happen at Rutgers, but if she puts it together, could be something special. we talked about the Michigan freshmen, Dalton. What if these Michigan freshmen avoid the sophomore slump? How good can this Michigan team be? I know this hurts you internally
It does.
as a Michigan State man, but put your dribble drive hat on here. And just how good can Michigan be if these freshmen don't take a step back?
I think Michigan's got a pretty big season in front of it this year. I think the way Olsen and Swords came along last year, you noticed a level of confidence, especially in the back half of that Big Ten season. I thought they weren't really backing down from people. Holloway, we talked about her. Mila Holloway really kind of drives it so well as a freshman. And at times they were kind of going as she went. As consistent as Olsen and Swords was, they needed Holloway to step up and make some plays for them. I think all three of them are poised for a pretty big year. I think when you take a look at what the rest of that group looks like, where the Bucknell transfer you have listed down below and Ashley at around 20 points a game, I think they strengthen that front court, bolster it a little bit. Of course, last year they were playing Greta Kampschrader at the 5.
Yep.
It was an all 5 out, just guard attack, perimeter attack. I think they gained a lot of experience from last year. Not only do I think they could avoid the sophomore slump, I think they're going to avoid the sophomore slump. I think Michigan's going to be really good.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to. Then they have 3 freshmen again inside the top 100 in the ratings. I mean, it feels like the sky is the limit for this Michigan team, and I'm excited to see what they look like on the floor. And I'm curious to see their non-con schedule and how much they will test themselves early like they did last year.
Well, and I'm also curious, too, when you say sky's the limit, if we're doing a ballot, and I know we're doing 1 through 5, and so I don't want to spoil or pull the curtain too much on it.
Let's do it right now.
Okay.
1 through 5.
Okay. Well, I imagine both of us have UCLA 1.
Yes.
Is sky the limit? Do you have Michigan 2?
I think I do. I do.
Okay.
Like, again, we're doing this for everybody listening at home who's a Maryland fan, who's a Washington fan, who's a USC fan, Ohio State. We're literally doing this off the cuff.
Yes.
I didn't tell Dalton about this beforehand.
I'm not.
I haven't even thought. I thought about this when I was putting the questions together at 9 a.m. this morning. I said, "What if we just ranked our top 5?" And I didn't think about it any further than that. So I'm thinking about it now. I mean, it's probably UCLA 1, Michigan 2.
Okay.
I think had Gracie Merkel stayed at Maryland, they could have been at 2. I think that loss hurts them a little bit, but I will put them at 3.
Okay.
I'm gonna forget somebody in the midst of this, but and what I think my brain does is my brain goes to who got the best transfer portal haul, and I'll probably in this exercise will discount a Nebraska who's going to bring everybody back. A Minnesota who's going to bring everybody back. But I think I would go UCLA, Michigan, Maryland, USC, Washington.
Interesting. Okay.
I could Ohio State, I just don't know. Like, I don't know what the ceiling is for them yet because I don't know what they totally have. And I guess USC would be in the same boat for me.
Yeah.
Michigan State is right there too. I would put them in the conversation as well.
I was gonna say, and of course in my top 5, and not even just from the bias. I mean and let's talk about them then, because I think that might be our biggest difference of opinion on the top 5. Grace Van Sluten returns.
Yep.
Alec returns. You also throw in the transfer of Jalen Brown, who averaged around 20 points a game at Arizona State. You get Rashunda Jones to run the point.
I think I would replace Washington with Michigan State. Now I knew I was going to forget somebody.
No, and I'm going to too. So there's no shame in the game.
But here's the question that will work with this. What if Ohio State and USC take steps back? They were 2-3 in the Big Ten this past season. I guess 1-3 actually in the Big Ten last season. USC loses everybody except for Kennedy Smith. That includes Juju Watkins, who we don't expect to play with the torn ACL. If she plays, it would be toward the end of the season, like an NCAA tournament run. That seems unlikely. So if they take a step back, which USC fans, I'm not saying you're going to miss the tournament. I'm not saying you're going to stink. I'm just saying that it might be a step back toward the pack because last year it was such a definitive 1-2.
Yep.
There was such a definitive line between the LA schools and everybody else. I think the pack is creeping up, and USC and Ohio State fall back into that pack. Ohio State loses probably their best player in Cody McMahon from last year. Now Jelani Cambridge has to wear a little bit more. Chance Gray's got to wear a little bit more. And they do have weapons coming in. I mean, their transfer haul includes Tiana Todd from Boston College, who averaged 14 points a game. And unproven, but Kylie Kitts, whose sister is Chloe Kitts. And you would think, okay, in the family, there's probably a lot there. So there's still talent there.
Yep.
But I do think they fall a little bit. And then that opens the door for a Michigan State, for a Washington, for a Michigan to jump in there. I think USC in the same boat. So let's hear your 5 then. I know Michigan State sounds like they're going to be in it. You list yours 1 through 5.
I would go UCLA 1. I would go Maryland 2.
Okay.
Even though Merkel withdrew, I think getting the addition of the Duke transfer, who I will learn how to pronounce the name by the next episode. I think I actually learned it and forgot it, and I feel just too unconfident to try it. And then Yarden Garzone, I think paired with Kayleen Schmeichel, I really like the talent and firepower that sits there. I would go at 3. You guys can call me a homer. I think I like Michigan State at 3.
You can put the Spartans above the Wolverines. All right.
And then I go Michigan 4. Also, it is sacrilege to go. So like we're absolutely gonna go Michigan State 3. We'll go Michigan 4.
This is for the safety of you. You know, you're living in East Lansing. We can't have people coming after you saying like, how dare you do that?
I don't need to be on posters on telephone poles.
Exactly. You're on a milk carton now. What's the 5 for you?
I think the 5th would be Washington. I think that's where I'm at.
I think for me, the 5th spot would be the 4, 5, 6 would be like Michigan State, USC, Washington.
Yeah.
In some order there.
And it's USC would probably be 6 for me. And again, It's not even so much. I mean, like you got the graphic down there at the bottom for the visual listeners, Ohio State and USC. Those to me are the 2 biggest successful teams from last year that have the largest question marks. Yes. It does not mean they cannot repeat or find that level again. But boy, we're talking about some really massive production hits.
Yes.
And it'll be, honestly, it's going to be fascinating to see how they fill that if they can. Like that will be a fun story to tell if they get back to the level they were last year.
And for USC, it's not really anything Lindsey Gottlieb and her staff lost to the portal. It's just a terrible injury. I mean, if Juju Watkins is on this team, you're talking about the LA schools 1-2 again.
Yep.
And
honestly, we could play a big what-if game of last year if Juju's healthy and they play UConn in that Elite 8.
Yeah. Oh, it would have been. I might have been the game of the tournament. Might have been the game of the tournament, and it still was a good game. But I mean, man, look,
USC hung with them. I mean,
I still have a scar in my heart from 2 days ago of watching a what if and an important game and an injury. So like, I relate to you USC fans. I really do. I mean, that's really hard. We've talked about him a lot. What if Brenda Freese hit another home run in the portal? I mean, she's had great success in the portal for a while now. I would say 2 years ago didn't go as well, but last year was an absolute home run. Bringing in Kayleen Schmeichel was a perfect addition to this team. Bringing in Tibiasu was perfect for this team. Hoffenbarger was a great addition. They brought in a lot of good pieces. So now the question here, Dalton, is what if she hit another home run? Because she only brought in 2, but they might be 2 of the biggest ones that anybody brought in the Big Ten. I'm going to take a stab at it. Aluchi Akinanwa from Duke. I don't know if that's right or not, but that's just looking at it.
I'm currently trying to find game notes to see if I can find the pronunciation.
Aluchi Akinanwa is what I'm going to commit to here. And I'm obviously very familiar with Yarden Garzone. And I think she could fit really good in this offense because I think last year when Indiana lost Grace Berger and then Chloe Moore McNeil didn't get off to a great start in the season and Alexis Bargesser was injured, it put a lot of ball handling on Yarden Garzone. And she can do it. Terry Morin's always called her a unicorn. She can play 1 through 5, and I'm sure Brenda Fries will utilize that because that's the one concern I have with this team is their size. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I think in a perfect world, Yarden Garzone's best role is as a catch-and-shoot, lethal three-point shooter. We know she shot 40% or better all 3 seasons. And yeah, she's the record holder for career threes at IU. So if you've got Kayleen Schmeichel and Bree McDaniel running the show, and you can just have Garzone being a pick-and-pop person, being a spot-up shooter, that type of stuff is huge. The concern for Maryland for me, if I'm nitpicking, Akinanwa and Garzone are both guard/wings. You've got Schmeichel, McDaniel, who are both point guard/shooting guards. Saylor Poffenbarger has some size, but is still kind of a wing player. She and Garzone are in very similar spots there. So what do you do without – this is why, like, if Gracie Merkel's there, you got your 5.
Right.
Gracie Merkel not being there now means they're going to have to rely on somebody who's a little bit unproven. And one of those people, this is one I do not know how to say. Isamenmi Azimamudu, redshirted last year for Maryland. Is there something there? She transferred in out of Gulf Coast State, averaged a double-double, and was a third-team NJCAA All-American, redshirted last year at Maryland. So is she the answer at forward? That's the question that Brenda Fries is going to have to answer because I don't think you want – Poffenbarger's a great rebounder, and Garzone can play almost any position, but I don't think you want them at your 5. So Can they find a 5 on this roster that can consistently produce? They don't even have to be like amazing. They just have to be solid, rebound the basketball, give them an interior threat that can balance out all these guards and wings that they have. That's the one concern I have for Maryland. But, man, this team's going to be really good.
No, I think so, too. And that's why I would call it a home run. I think you laid it out perfectly, and I'm also glad you filibustered enough to let me get the pronunciation. It is officially, according to Duke's notes last year, Aluchi Akanawa.
Okay, so the second N is gone in the pronunciation.
Akanawa.
Aluchi Akanawa.
Aluchi Akanawa.
That rolls off the tongue really well.
Yeah, we'll have it down, Pat. And fans get used to the name because she is a defensive stalwart.
Yep.
And she's going to be – and she figured it out offensively, too. She got in a rhythm, was averaging over 10 points a game there at Duke. She's going to be huge for this team. But I think you nailed it. I think maybe there is an oversaturation of the same type of player maybe with this squad. Yep. But it's really good. And it also comes at a time contextually for the Big Ten where the post player – I haven't taken a long time evaluating this, but you have Lauren Betts at UCLA, but Markowski's gone at Nebraska. I mean, how many?
Kendall Bostic's gone at Illinois.
Bostic's gone? Like, how many?
Destiny Adams gone at Rutgers. Yeah, I mean, you're probably looking at Betts, Merkel, Stolke, and even Stolke's like not a total
kind of a hybrid. Yeah.
She's a hybrid, kind of like a Grace Van Sluten.
Yeah. But with that context, you could maybe get away with a little bit more than you could if there were still some of those Markowskis and Bostics you had to go against on a night-to-night basis.
And it's a lot of like, okay, is Grabovskaya going to work in Washington?
Right.
Is Sophia Kanik, the Bucknell transfer, going to be dominant at Michigan? Does Zanaya Saka and Guman, who was a 5-star recruit who went to UCLA, it didn't work, now is at Indiana, does she unlock something? Yep. The post has a lot of question marks. You're exactly right, and it'll be curious to see how all that pans out. I feel like we're going to do a lot of this where we forget about Minnesota. I refuse to let us forget about Minnesota.
Thank you.
What if Mara Braun stays healthy? Like, that's got to be one of the biggest what ifs in the Big Ten over the last 2 seasons, probably more last year. But what if Mara Braun stays healthy? This team they won, what was that, the WBIT last year that they won, and they were in the finals or the Final Four of one of the tournaments 2 years ago. So they've had some postseason experience with this current roster that they bring back. Dalton, what if Mara Braun stays healthy?
Then the Gophers are dancing bare minimum if Braun is healthy. And if Braun's healthy, we start talking about, I don't know if she's healthy, if I catapult them all the way into the top 5 where I need to rearrange. But they're kind of fringe.
Yeah.
I mean, they're definitely in the top half of the Big Ten if Braun is healthy, at least in my mind today. I mean, they've been able to keep this core together. I mean, you have the visual graphic up there. Braun's work when she's healthy, leading scorer, but Grace Graholski's really come into her own. McKinney had a big freshman season last year for the Gophers. Maya Battle. I mean, there's a lot of pieces to like with this Minnesota team if they have their alpha, which is Braun. You have to imagine that team could climb as high as 6, 7, 8 in the Big Ten this year.
For sure. And not pictured on here are Mallory Heyer and Sophie Hart, who are also back.
Really good, too.
Yeah.
Really good.
Look, I only have so much room on these graphics to put people on here. And when Minnesota brings 6 people back, like I don't know what to do. So they bring in 3 pretty decent scorers from other schools. Finau Tonga from San Jose State, Tracy Bershers from UAB, and Briley Glenn from Kansas State. We'll talk about this more in the Minnesota preview, which I think will be sooner rather than later because they have most of the kind of the most production coming back in the conference. But this team, I think, Dalton, if Mara Braun stays healthy, this will be my bold prediction. If Mara Braun stays healthy, they are a top 5 team in the Big Ten.
Wow, I like that. That is hot.
I'm not willing to put them in my top 5 right now just because I don't know about her health. I need to see it first. And again, I said this back in the spring, and I still stand, like, I still want to reiterate this. Mara Braun being healthy is not going to be 3 years ago when she was averaging 19 points a game.
Right.
She probably doesn't have, like, let's be honest, it's 2 season-ending injuries in a row. But if she can give you 12 to 14 points a game and gives you minutes, now you've got this established crop of people around her that is all of a sudden very experienced, very mature, a lot of leaders that can pair really well with her. So I'm excited to see how that team looks. We've kind of talked, we've danced around it a little bit. Actually, let's finish with that one. I got 2 more. Let's go to this one.
All right.
What if Robin Pingeton turns Wisconsin around quickly? Because we have seen this track record in the Big Ten. Shauna Green at Illinois, Katie Gerald's at Purdue, and Dawn Plitzowit at Minnesota have been very quick turnarounds. Very quick. And I know Minnesota hasn't technically made it into the NCAA tournament with Plitzowit, but if Mara Braun plays either of the last 2 seasons, they're a tournament team.
Mm-hmm.
So we have seen this track record in the Big Ten before. What if Robin Pingeton just goes ahead and does it at Wisconsin? Here's the list of what they've got. If you're a visual watcher with us here, you can see it. For the podcast listeners, Ronnie Porter withdrew from the portal and came back. So a good point guard to work with. Lily Cron comes back, a really good 3-point shooter off the bench for Wisconsin. And then it's a host of players in the transfer portal. Destiny Howell from Howard is a 15-point scorer. Bronna Ware from Stony Brook, almost a 15-point scorer. Gift Achuna, who is one of the great names that we got in the transfer portal in the Big Ten, comes over from Southern Illinois, a 14.5-point scorer. Kyra Daniels, a 12-point scorer from Missouri State. So if you can get any of these players to bring that production with them from their previous school and take it up to the Big Ten, I don't know what I'm asking in terms of, like, what can Wisconsin be? I think NCAA tournament may be lofty, but can they be a competitive, tough out, be in the Big Ten tournament, and win 7, 8, 9 games in the league?
And that, I think, is the realistic kind of gauge for this. Because you talk about some of those quick turnarounds that we've seen in the Big Ten here in recent time. Look, Wisconsin, I don't know if any player really in the country had the dependability or efficiency or impact values that Sarah Williams had at
Yep.
Wisconsin. She's gone. She's at UConn. What's left at Wisconsin? Like for Pinchon to come in, and if he quickly turns that around, that would be an A+ job. And I'm not even saying it's not doable, but to your point, like I think if you measure it as, hey, you're in the Big Ten tournament, try making some noise there, do some different things. I think that seems to be where I would be aiming and hoping for if I'm Wisconsin in a post Sarah Williams world where you haven't really had enough time to get your feet under you on the treadmill.
Yeah, I don't want to put like on Robin Pinchon like, hey, you gonna make the tournament this year. But I think they can be a team that, again, kind of like Penn State, where it's like, I don't want to go to Madison.
Right.
Like, this team plays hard. They're gritty. They're tough. Like, I don't want to go. Like, just be a 13, 14 seed in the Big Ten tournament. And like, I'm kind of looking at some of these teams toward the bottom of the league and say, raise the floor a little bit of the Big Ten.
Yep.
And make, like we said, with the LA schools being up here and there being quite a bit of a gap to even 3 and 4 and then below that, there was also kind of a bottom 4 in the league.
Yeah.
And then a gap.
Yep.
So can that bottom 4 raise it and kind of mesh themselves into that bottom of the middle tier? I think is where Wisconsin could fit in. All right, last one. We've danced around the topic. What if there's a surprise team in the top third of the standings? So that's top 6. That's a tournament team. That's a competing for a double bye team, but it's not a UCLA. It's not a Michigan. It's not a Washington. It's not a Maryland. And for argument's sake, it's not Minnesota because we've already talked about what they can do. I think that's the easy answer, is that it's Minnesota.
Yeah, agreed.
If it's not Minnesota, what if there's a surprise team in the top third of the standings? Like, I don't want to go 2 homer picks here with you going Michigan State in the top 5 and me throwing Indiana out here, because I don't know. I truly don't know what Indiana is going to be, but I trust that Terry Morin is one of the top 4 or 5 coaches in this league, maybe even top 3, and she can take this team and make it really good. I would say, though, I think that a team that nobody's talking about is Nebraska.
Yeah, I had 2 come to mind, and Nebraska was one of them. And with what we saw from Britt Prince in her freshman year, look, I mean, there's a lot to figure out with Markowski being gone and how you build the system, because it was for round 1, and you posted Markowski up on the block and you played around that. But I liked what some of those guards were doing, especially on the back half of the year, Austin.
Yeah, I think they're a choice. I think there's a couple of I schools. I would say Iowa and I would say Illinois.
Well, and I was also going to say, look, we both gave our top 6, and unless I'm just misremembering what yours was, Ohio State wasn't in our top 6. And Ohio State, with Cambridge leading the attack, could absolutely be in that picture.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Mm-hmm. I think what I would want from this question is hey, who's a team that maybe was not in the top 6 last year?
Not such an easy one like Ohio State.
Exactly.
It kind of goes against the spirit, but on technicality, it could be them.
Correct. Like Iowa brings back Stolke, McCabe, Feuerbach, Ava Hayden, and Tegan Mulaney, a couple of freshmen that had great years last year. They bring in Emily Rodriguez, a good scorer from UCF, Chastity Wright from Georgia Tech. They've got a couple of good freshmen coming in as well. And in year 2 for Jan Jansen, maybe it's a little bit more comfortable. They get off to a better start.
Yeah.
And maybe they're certainly not out of it. And then for Illinois, this team could be really good. I'm just looking at it right now. They bring in an excellent, one of the best freshman classes in the Big Ten, number 8 in the country, according to 24/7. Destiny Jackson's a top 30 player. Sarah Parchment's a top 40 player. She could start right away at the forward position. They bring in Maddie Weber, a 13-point-a-game scorer from Villanova. They bring in Alea Guyton, who you and I both love that fit there
Love.
in Champaign. I think she'll start right away at the point guard. Barry Wallace was forced to do so much last season, and I think that could be for Illinois' benefit this season. Gretchen Dolan comes back from injury. Jasmine Brown-Haggard's back. So there's a lot to like there with Illinois. I think they're an answer. I think Nebraska's an answer. I think Iowa's an answer. I think those are all really good. Laying out the case for Nebraska real quick. No transfers out. Natalie Potts, Britt Prince, Logan Nisley, Callan Hake, Jessica Petrie, Petra Bojan, Amaya Hargrove. They're all back. Claire Johnson, a Samford transfer, comes in a guard, average 12 a game. Haley Weaver did not play last year for Northwestern, but averaged 8 a game 2 years ago. She transfers in. Emily Fisher from Maryland. Didn't see a ton of playing time at Maryland, but maybe there's something there if she gets the opportunity. And we know that Amy Williams wants to play a deep team. She wants to play 10 to 12 people every game and keep everybody fresh. So the more bodies she can bring in there from the portal, the better. I mean, I named 7 returnees, and then there's 4 transfers and a freshman. Boom. There you go. I mean, that's a team. You're looking at that little area in the middle of the Big Ten, Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska. 3 teams that I don't think anybody's going to be – I don't think when you turn on the pundits, which I guess are us now, but when you turn on the pundits, they're not going to be talking a lot about those 3 schools. But there's no doubt they have a lot of talent at those 3 schools.
And you mentioned Natalie Potts at Nebraska. I mean, for fans that remember, Nebraska lost her with a season-ending injury, and it changed that team. Her coming back could be a huge just rejuvenation for that program. So that's something to be really excited about.
Yeah, and because I feel obligated by fan bases to mention teams, because I know they're listening, they're like, why didn't you just spend an hour and 11 minutes without talking about the Oregon Ducks outside of Hannah Stolke's name being put down wrong? Yeah. Oregon does bring back Elisa Mevius, who was their defensive stalwart, Amina Muhammad, Ahisa Tute, Sophia Bell. Nobody high-level scoring, but they didn't have any high-level scorers really last year outside of Deja Kelly. Mia Jacobs is a huge pickup from Fresno State, an 18-point-a-game scorer. Astra Tahina from Washington State and Avery Kane, that's the UCLA transfer that they have. Another good transfer haul for Kelly Graves and Oregon. He has a top 50 freshman coming in Janiyah Williams. This is a team that surprised people last year. Nobody saw Oregon coming last year, and they were a tournament team that probably played their best basketball in January. But I wouldn't be shocked if they find their way up toward the top 6, 7 spots in the standings as well. So, but it also speaks to the depth of this league. Somebody who we think could be a top 6 team in the league could finish 13th and still make the tournament.
When you get a baker's dozen dancing, I mean, it just is what it is.
Yeah, like I think a team like Indiana could finish 10th in the standings and be a tournament team, and it's a good year. Yep. Like it's so hard to be top 6 in this league. So, any other things you wanted to bring up? I think we've touched on pretty much everybody at this point.
I think so. This was a good summer little recap. Clean up.
I told you the goal was to ask questions that made us talk about as many teams as we could. I think we talked about a lot of teams. We named a lot of players. Obviously, this is just a very brief overlook of everything. From here on in, we are doing deep dive previews into all of these teams starting next Tuesday, July 1st, running through the start of November, which, of course, is the start of the season. 18 weeks. We will have 18 team-centered previews for you. Your team will be covered sometime in the next 4 months, which is bonkers that our preview season is going to take over 4 months. But that's where we're at, and we're going to start those previews next week. I don't know who we're starting with. It's going to be a total mystery to everybody. But I know that on Tuesday we will have a preview episode for you. We'll bring on guests. It's not just going to be Dalton and I wondering what Minnesota could be. We're going to bring on people from Minnesota to tell us about the team. Like, it's not just going to be us guessing on what we think might happen. So we'll bring in some guests. We'll start preview season on July 1st, which is a week from today. We're excited to have you. Download the episodes on Apple and Spotify. Go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, the Back Home Network. Leave us a rating. Let us know how we're doing. And tell a friend. The preview season starts next week. Dalton, stay cool. I know you're going golfing. That's crazy. And I don't know if it's as hot up there as it is here, but I wish you the best, and hopefully you don't overheat.
A little bit of sunscreen, water. We'll make it.
Sunscreen, the bucket hat, and you're good to go. Well, thanks for joining us on episode 52 of the Dribble Drive. We're back next week as we start the 3 episodes. Excited to have you back for weekly episodes. Excited to do some previews. For Dalton Shetler, I'm Austin Render. This has been episode 52.